He just slurped it. I really hope you enjoyed this. This line has been nothing short of a pleasure to fish. Again, multiple reels with it, many trips, many hours, and most importantly, many different spider. Gentlemen, ladies, and anyone in between, I welcome you all, and today we're going to be getting up close and personal with Berkley's best braided line, their relatively new X9. And what X9 stands for is 9 strands, and from what I can tell, it's an 8-strand weave that's woven around a 9th carrier, similar to what you find in Finn's 40G, only it's not wound as tightly and it's much less expensive. 40G is very expensive and runs around $50 for 300 yards, $55 for 300 yards. And that was one of my all-time favorite braids, and I've seen many complaints about it. I've witnessed it firsthand because one of my buddies bought the same line that I was using for a year and a half without any trouble at all whatsoever. And I felt so badly for him that I was constantly retying Alberto knots and whatnot. We don't know if it was his NRX rod beating up the knot, but he was getting fraying, desheathing, weird line twist that would actually kind of, when it would twist enough, it would desheath and run up the line. I've seen that with another buddy's reel who's using it on a conventional. I have not experienced any issues at all whatsoever to speak of with this line, and in fact, it's on my short list of braids that I'll continue to use. Now, this is 30-pound test. It's on a Bantam MGL, which, if you're not familiar with this reel, it's around a 300 and change reel from Shimano. Regardless of what they call their core solid body, it's one of the finest bait casters at any price point. And fishing this reel spooled up with 30-pound for the entire year so far, it's 6 months into the season, nary an issue, nary a fiber out of place. I intentionally did not cut back any length of line other than when retying leaders and knots and whatnot for the past 2 months, and I don't think you can see any out of place fuzzies. I'll go ahead and get it up close on the bench, see if I can find anything for you guys. But for the price and what you get, it's super smooth. And just like any other super line out there, there's almost no stretch. It knots very well, and I've used this all the way down to 6-pound test, which is super thin, which you rarely see braids rated at 6-pound tests that actually are a truly thin line. I think the only super readily available braids that are that thin are the Suffix Nano in 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 6-pound tests. You have Daiwa's J-Braid Grand in 6-pound, which is super thin, but I've had some serious issues with that line using BFS gear and some spinning tackle. And this stuff here, I've used this to catch striped bass using 15-pound braid, using a PR knot to like a 40-pound leader, and I've caught bass without issue up to 25 pounds on it. It has become one of my favorite lines on the market, to be quite honest with you guys. The only line that I've really put more time that I may have a little bit fonder appeal for is the Power Pro Super Slick V2, and that's coming from a guy that gave up on Power Pro regular 4-strand years ago, not because I had any of the phantom break-off issues the guys have claimed, but I just like the smoother characteristics, the quieter characteristics, some of the 8-strand braids, and I only used it when I was fishing heavy vegetation. I went from that to Super Slick V2 with high hopes, and I was immediately let down. It frayed very easily. The Super Slick V2 in 8, 20, 40, and 65-pound braid has performed beautifully, although I do find that the Onyx color seems to wear better than the Moonshine or the blue. This stuff, I've only used it in green, and the 6-pound test in yellow, flawless. It's a little bit limper than the Super Slick V2 when it's new and when it's broken in. It's one of the softer braids, but I don't get as many tip wraps as I've experienced with a dragonfly just landed on the back of my neck. I hope it was a dragonfly. I don't get as many tip wraps as I did with the Maxima 8, which is again a $50 braid, super smooth, relatively similar in construction in terms of feel, fit and finish, in terms of its suppleness, but for whatever reason this stuff doesn't seem to get tip trapped nearly as much. So we'll go ahead and make a couple casts just so you guys can hear what the line sounds like come through the guides. This is a Daiwa Steez AGS. It may sound a little different compared to some other rods out there that use metal frame guides, which kind of twang and zing. And we kind of thumbed that on the way out because we didn't want to run to that log jam. Kind of turn out of the breeze, hopefully the wind doesn't pick up. It's silent. It's about as silent as a braided line can get at any price range. The only quieter braids that or super lines that I've fished, first and foremost, it's Gliss. Gliss is the quietest line I've ever used. It's not a braid though. It's just PE lines run next to each other with some sort of bonding agent that over time will wear off, and you'll have like a flattened piece of floss like without its wax. Oh, we just whacked that dragonfly twice. Look at that. The only braided line that I can honestly say that is quieter and smoother in feel is the Gosen 16, which is a Japanese braided line that I've never seen used, heard of anything even close. It's a 16 carrier braid woven very tightly, and there is literally nothing you can feel. It used to be the Jerry Brown hollow core line 1, like 80 pound and 100 pound, 60 pound were as smooth as you were going to get. That's changed. Gosen reigns supreme. But in terms of the affordable lines, your Spider Wires, the Ultra Cast, the Stealth, Stealth Camo, the Maxima 8, this stuff, anything from Power Pro, anything from Insert 8-strand braid, whether it's a big name or no name. This stuff, Super Slick and Gosen and Maxima, pretty much round out my top 4. Lines I haven't really put any time with or have any experience with are some from Siguar. Just never got around to it. But in terms of a line that's readily available, very affordable, and ticks all the boxes, I gotta say, this stuff, unless you're fishing heavy vegetation, has to be on a short list of lines to consider. It just wears well over time, doesn't get ropey, doesn't get fluffy. I don't even know if I can open up this braid. Let's see if I can pinch it and open it. Barely, see? Some braids you can go all the way out to here and compress it and it'll open up. This stuff, not the case. A long time ago, when Berkley had their tracer braid, which was the alternating green and chartreuse, they had a solid green version I just never used. I just happened to get a million of those tracer spools on sale for like $6 a piece. That was the toughest and best wearing line I'd ever used. I used it in the surf, used it for tuna, trolling for tuna, and that was one of my all-time favorite lines in terms of kick it around, beat it up. It just lasts and wears well. But that had a heavy coating on it. It was a real waxy type finish. This stuff doesn't have much of a coating, and its break-in period is almost instantaneous. There's really not much of a difference between day 1 and hour 500 or fish 300. It really does stay consistent, and it performs just as good in terms of what I've experienced on spinning gear as it does on bait casters. I've read some comments about guys that have wind knot issues, and for me, guys, the last time I threw a wind knot was I was in Montauk. I got a Z-Bass back from service, and they updated the spool, and they had to shim the reel internally to get the new spool design to fit and match up with the line guide. And I went to go use my old spool, and that shimming didn't work well. There was a big gap at the top, and I started wind knot after wind knot after wind knot until the line was down to probably about 100 yards short. Since then, I think when I was fishing that world's cheapest spinning reel, with that $5 spinning reel, I spooled up some 10-pound J-braid grand, and it I proceeded to wind knot every inch of line off that reel. But when it comes to mainstream reels and all that kind of stuff, nary a wind knot in close to 20 years. So when guys say that they're having issues with wind knots, I just got to ask, what reels are they using? Are they using like old Penn Fierces or Penn Battles or old Penn Z's, or just reels in general that tend to lay line in an uneven fashion and leave gaps at the top of the spool, where when you do make a cast with the spinning reel, the line will tend to come out or come off ahead of where it should be, and then you kind of sneeze that blob of braid through your guides. That hasn't happened at all, not even once with this stuff, whether it was the 15, the 30, or the 6 that I've used again on spinning and bait casting reels for quite a few fish worth of time. And when you get into fish thick, you're not really thinking too much about line management. If you had, like, for me, it's kind of grooved. It's like second nature. So I'll manually close the bails. You know, when I cast with a spinning reel, I'm always shutting the bail manually, and in one motion, I'm just kind of tensioning the line on the roller, so I don't have any opportunity for there to be any loose coils that stack out of place on the spool when you start your retrieve. So on the next cast, you're making that cast, and poof, that line's flying off the spool at 100 miles an hour, and it just kind of grabs that little fluff of braid and pulls it out ahead of when it should, and that's how you get a wind knot. Haven't had that. This line stacks beautifully. Again, I'm using a bait caster in this video, and I will continue to do so. And I will continue to recommend this line to anybody who asks. Knotting is spectacular. I've used everything from uni knots to my terminal tackle to line-to-line joins. I'm an Alberto, FG, and PR knot. Those are the only 3 line-to-line joins that I generally use, unless I'm using a double length of line like a Bimini to a Bristol or a loop-to-loop connection. Generally nowadays I'm using a PR knot when I can. And this does it all. A lot of the modern braids or the modern super lines, Fireline, Ultra 8, Nanofill, Gliss, and there's one from the company that makes, is it Nomad? I forget what it was. It's the same stuff as Gliss. If you don't tie a double polymer and you try to tie like an 8 or a 9 turn uni, it'll slip right out. If you try to tie a single polymer, it's going to break at half of its rated break strength. You have to use double polymers or triple polymers, or you have to use an FG knot to realize anything close to its true potential. And again, when you're talking about braided line potential, this is 30-pound braid. I'm willing to bet that it breaks probably somewhere close to like 40, 45 if you use a PR knot, which is a 99% knot strength. So when you tie a uni knot, you're compromising the strength of the braid on a straight pull because you have that knot that weakens a portion of the line. When you tie an FG knot, a GT knot, a PR knot, you can actually realize that true or close to that true breaking strength. So 30-pound braid will all of a sudden turn into 40-pound braid. Just gotta be careful what knot you choose, because if you go with too high of a leader, say if I get hung up on that end of the cast and I go to pull out my snag using a PR knot to say 50-pound leader, which is very common, going 30 to 50 or 30 to 80 at times if there are bluefish or toothy critters around, you will break, you will find a weak spot well ahead of your lure, your plug, or whatnot. So you got to be careful with your knots. But with an Alberto, an 8-turn Alberto, the improved Alberto, I'll put a link up here to where I put how to tie the improved Alberto. Spectacular. The line stacks well, doesn't bind up ahead of where it should. It's easy to cinch down, it locks up tight, it doesn't burn into itself. I really hate these stupid keepers. I really do. And that's kind of a testament of the limpness of the line. So it's actually able to sag down and get hung up on this stupid Fuji $600 rod. They can't give me an actual keeper. And while I'm looking at it, I've never understood this. Most of the people fish with a right-handed reel like this. Wouldn't it make sense to have the stees flipped? I mean, are people fishing like this where everything's right side up? See what I mean? If I was a lefty, I'm like, yeah, stees, SVS, Daiwa. Now it's 45X. AWAD. So yeah, never understood that. And not only that, you can see the outlines of the decals. That's kind of cheesy. $600 rod, one of the best rods in the market, but man, they could have done much better with it. So I think we're getting a little sidetracked, which is what always happens when I'm just rambling on incoherently. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this. This line has been nothing short of a pleasure to fish. Again, multiple reels with it, many trips, many hours, and most importantly, many different spider, get away, many different fish and conditions in which I was pulling fish out of different types of structure. Has not let me down. And that's, you know, something like a J-braid Grand had many issues, many break-offs, many frayed like you wouldn't believe, to the point where I'm cutting it back multiple times on a single outing. And I would just walk and fish through the same area with this stuff and I wouldn't have a single problem. on the same rod, switching out reels. You know, it's not the level one, it's not the guides, it's the line itself. It's not where I'm fishing and how I'm fishing. But this line seems to do very well, hold up very well, and stay very consistent. So, yeah. Till next time, guys, tight lines, and I shall see you soon. Super fun. Little striper. Oh, no, it's a largemouth. It's not a little largemouth either. Look at this. Look at this toad. Rare river bass. And this is a waterproof reel, so we're going to just let it down. You are on a bed, weren't you? I can't believe how big this largemouth is. Look at the size of this absolute monster. Beautiful bass. He just slurped it. Got a little bit of heavy drag for 15-pound braid. There we go. Hopefully it's in frame. That's a good rod butts at tail. Go gadget bass. Good fish. Good fish. Big fish. That's a nice fish. Ew. Oh, these bass have teeth. Whoa, another good fish. Post spawn, starting to fatten up. Look at that. What is up with you, buddy? That's a bite mark. It's, I don't know what that is. Good luck to you. Oh, really? Oh, no. long rod's nice. Just stick the butt of the rod in my thigh and keep it straight up, and he'll pinwheel in circles. It's got enough strength to keep him from going anywhere. Settle down, settle down, settle down. Chunky little guy. About 18, 19. No muss. No fuss. Next cast. Much better fish. Much better fish. Much better fish. Much better, much better, much better. Yes. Look at you. Post spawn and pretty. Big, big, big fish. What is going on up there, buddy? Wow. That's a big fish. Thank you. Very next cast, we got the humpy, and we got the big girl. After we bumped the carp. Right on the bank. Is this a flathead or a bullhead? Look at you, Big Willie. Look at you. Thanks, buddy.